so you can open your eyes. Hit each one of these one more time. Yeah, looks like it. Okay. The whiteboard. Here. On the left side. Thank you. So this is the first of 5 classes, and it's actually the first 2 of 10 classes. This is a traditional Gelugpa Buddhist course which Geshe Michael has created to help us understand what was contained in the 5 great books of Tibetan Buddhism. And the way he parsed it all out was in these different courses. There are 15 of them that cover the great books, plus 2 others, and then there are 3 review courses, and this is one of the review courses. So in total, for teacher certification, one takes all of these 18 courses, does the homeworks, quizzes, and finals. And even if you're not intending to be a teacher, what's in these courses a tremendous foundation for understanding Buddhism in general, and specifically Tibetan Buddhism. And I've found through my own experience that it's been a wonderful way to reinvigorate my own childhood spiritual tradition, which was Catholicism. That by studying another religion deeply, I can see the merit of a religion that I really eschewed years ago. So I'm beginning to appreciate the nature of all religious traditions and why they were designed and how they are helpful to us in living the lives that we live. So this course will be a review of courses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Today, because we're doing 2 courses in one day, we will completely go over course 1. Next Sunday, course 2, and so on. And just to give you some information about the courses, I brought a couple of these, and I'm going to ask that Craig and Karen not take them because they've received them before. Whoops, sorry. Let me see how many I have. And you know the course is quite intimately at this point. So Craig and Karen are basically taking these. See, Lou, would you mind? One of these and giving one to Ruth, who is that lovely lady in purple here. Okay. Thank you. So Craig and Karen are taking this as a review course, and I'm going to assume that Lou and Ruth are taking it as a preview course.
Yeah.
And it works very well that way. I can speak from experience because when I took this course, Lama Root was teaching it, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now, probably 5. And I think maybe I had completed 1 course when I took it. So I can tell you it's a beautiful review course. And that if you are then inspired to go back and do more work in the other courses, you can go ahead and find that information at a couple of places. The knowledge base, and when you put it into your search engine, you can make it all one word. I believe it's .com, right? Mm-hmm. And go to teachings. One of the first opportunities that you come to on this website is, and it gives you all of the printed matter and the audios with Geshe Michael, who created these courses, teaching it. Alternatively, you can go to Wisdom's Heart, which is the name of this organization. No apostrophe in the website. And you can look under various teachers' names. These courses have been taught here, some of them more than once. A number of them are under Jesse Fallon. And I've done some. Phil Salzman. and Margaret Redding. And there are a couple of others, but Margaret Reddington, thank you.
I think it's 2 B's.
I think it's 1 B. I could be wrong. There are a couple others who have taught recently, but we're the teachers who have taken 36 courses actually in total to prepare to be teachers. You'll find, unfortunately, our website is still set up so that it's under teachers' names rather than under the content. So the sheet I gave you shows the courses not in numerical order, but rather collected by subject matter. And I like to do it this way so you can have a sense of courses that might be prerequisites for other courses. Or maybe you just like to pick the topic that you're interested in. So this shows you the topic under the Geshe subject, and Geshe is the name of an advanced degree in Tibetan Buddhism. And then the book that was drawn upon is called the root text. Usually you get information from the root text, and then you get commentaries as well. Typically when you do the readings, you'll see the root text is the indented information, and then all around it are commentaries by other, generally monks, who have studied extensively and debated and used their logic to think about the meaning of the root text. And then the name of the course does also imply something about what is entailed in the course. This course is number 1. The principal teachings of Buddhism. That's what we're going to do today. Next week we'll be doing 2, Buddhist Refuge. The week after 3, meditation. After that 4 is the proof of future lives, and 5 is how karma works. So that's the whole course that you'll be participating in, hopefully, if you continue on. Are there questions about this? No? We are recording this. We often have several recorders going because we've had multiple failures in the past. Do we have anybody out in Webland?
I don't see anyone.
Okay, interesting. We had several people sign up from outside of the center and from inside this area too. So we'll see. People don't make every class, and that reminds me to say that if you are intending this for credit, you need to attend 4 of the 5 offerings. That's Geshe Michael's rule about credit. And that means you're allowed to miss 2 courses, but you still have to make up the work. And also, for credit, the review courses need to be taken in person. Again, that's Geshe Michael's rule. And there's been sort of a leniency around that, and people are allowed to watch it now through webcasting if their teachers say that's okay. So let's just for a minute before we get into the matter of today, talk a little bit more about this homework aspect too. The homework, Geshe Michael decided after he participated in a Geshe degree, which was all done orally, heard the teachings, memorized the teachings, debated the teachings, that probably wouldn't fly here in this country. And so he decided that the way we learn, have been taught to learn, is through things like lectures and readings and homework and tests. So he put together these materials, which you see in binder form. I just want to say that the earlier courses aren't this thick. They're a lot less work, but also really important. This is, remember, the essence of 5 whole courses. So when you think about that, it's not really so thick. So if you are wanting to do this for credit, or if you want to just try it out with the style that Geshe Michael has offered us, doing the homeworks and quizzes, then what we do is we ask someone to be a grader for your work, but you are encouraged to grade your own work first. When you get the printed materials, the answer key is included, so you're encouraged to go back and correct your own work, and the grader/reader is just doing it to be sure that you didn't interpret it in a way that might have some misconceptions. So it's just a second glance. We all need editors, right? When we write, I know I do. So the requirement to be a grader is that you've taken at least 2 of these courses. And so I'm going to ask 2 people in this room who have taken 2 of these courses to be graders. And that would be Karen and Craig. And hopefully you know who they are, the ones that aren't Ruth. Karen and Craig. Okay, so all you have to do when you come back, if you've done your homework or quizzes, you just hand them off to them, and they will probably exchange theirs so they get it corrected. Let me encourage you, if you don't feel like you want to do all of that work, that you think about doing the quiz at least, because the quiz, again, is the synthesis of the synthesis of the synthesis. So, and usually I don't know how many are on the quiz here, maybe 5 or 6 questions. So the idea is that you would hear what's going on today, then you would go home and tonight or tomorrow answer those questions from what you heard here today. Then you'd check your work, and then you'd bring it in next week for somebody to look over for you. Any questions about that? Okay. And maybe you just want to listen, and that's fine too. But those of us who have been in teaching know that research suggests that to really grasp an idea, you really need to have 3 experiences with it. So just hearing it maybe won't ensure that you're going to have good retention of it. So it's a good idea to do something written. That's why I suggest at least the quiz. And reading, we're encouraged to do the readings because those are incredible efforts on the part of Geshe Michael and Lama Christie. They've translated all these materials that were originally in Tibetan, some of which were originally in Sanskrit. So in respect for that work that was done, we are encouraged to do the reading. The answers to most of the homework questions can be found in the reading, not always all of them. What I'm going to suggest you do today to help you prepare to do the homework is to take the class notes. So I would say turn to the class notes. You can find them. And the idea is not to fill in the homework during class. It's to go home and do the homework at home. That's why it's called homework. But I found that by following the class notes, it just allowed me to listen more and not be writing copiously. And it's important to take it in through the ears. And so if you have out the class notes, then you can just add to it anything maybe that I say that's not in there that you think might be important. And then you have all you need really to do your homework and to get the gist of what this course is about. All right. And Lou, I didn't mention the printed materials for a lot of the courses can be ordered from Seacoast. Is that another word? I think it is Seacoast. Graphics on Railroad Ave in Gloucester. Do you live here?
Beverly.
Beverly, cool.
Yeah.
But could he borrow that book?
Was it from the shelves?
It's right over here,
Yeah.
You just find it out.
And run off the
Homeworks.
homeworks and quizzes if you want, and just return it.
Okay, sure.
Good. How did you end up here?
Just saw it on the website.
Oh, good.
Thought,
We have had people from Beverly come before too.
yeah, it's
Dave.
John. Was he?
He's from Reading, isn't he?
No, a different John.
A different John.
And there was another person too, I can't remember.
Where's
But
Dave?
welcome,
Where's Dave from?
Hamilton.
church is in Beverly.
Yeah, that's what they mean. So the ideas here are very much from the Gelugpa Tibetan lineage. There are 4 lineages in Tibet, and this is slanted towards the Gelugpa tradition. And I say that because if you go to another Buddhist group, you might have things put to you a little differently. You probably aren't going to get the courses like this. Some people have written books that you can use to help get these ideas in your own language, but you won't get these binders and things generally that I know of. So the other 3 Tibetan lineages are the Sakya, the Kagyu, and the Nyingma. And what that means is that they had sort of different, I mean, all of them originated with the Buddha, but as centuries went on, different groups went in slightly different ways in terms of how they practiced. Generally, the content is similar in all the lineages, but the ways in which people practice, the ways in which the information is delivered, those can be different. And similarly, there's Buddhism in other countries, and so that Buddhism will take a different shape too, because a lot of the rituals in particular and other things are very cultural. So the things that you see around you here are very Tibetan. Okay, they like beautiful statues, and the thangkas actually are of Hindu origin. These paintings that you see on cloth represent the qualities of an enlightened being. They're not gods per se, but they represent qualities of somebody who understands what's really going on. So we have some of the trappings of Tibetan Buddhism here, which we like. It inspires us. But if you go to a Zen Buddhist center, for instance, you're not going to see all of this. It's going to be very pristine, quiet. The emphasis is on meditation and logic. In Gelugpa Tibetan Buddhism, the emphasis is, I would say, on studying and meditating. All the traditions embrace meditation as the way to find out the truth about what's going on. So what I try to do anyway when I teach is follow along in the order that the homework is presented, so that it's not so hard to find the information that you're looking for. And after all, that's what Geshe Michael thought was really important, so I'm going to emphasize it. The first question is in your reading on page 1. Sometimes I'll tell you where it is in the reading, and sometimes I won't, because I haven't found it in the reading. Or maybe I haven't had time to do all the reading. This first reading was quite long, I don't know, 60, 70 pages, something like that. Very interesting, though. Hope you'll read it. Because remember, this particular class is all about getting an overview of this particular type of Buddhism. So a lot of interesting things to see in the reading that aren't covered in the class. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to cover 60 pages of content in the time allowed. And that's just for the first half of today. We have a second half, which is additional pages. So almost always when you start one of these courses, the first question is, well, where did this information come from? So that you understand the authenticity of what is put forth here. And this is from a text called The Principal Teachings of Buddhism. And it's by J. Tsongkhapa. So if you're following along with the notes, you'll see that right at the top of the page, class notes. Did you find the class notes, Lou? I think you're in the reading.
Well, I found this page 1 here.
Right.
Is that the class notes?
No, that's the reading. Could you, Greg, help him find the class notes? They're way ahead. The reading's fine, but you won't find some of the other information later on.
Two desks. There, here.
Oh, okay.
So what the class notes are notes that a student took when Geshe Michael first taught these courses. This course was first taught in 1999, by the way. So it's 14 years old now. And Geshe Michael is teaching other things now. He's still teaching and preparing materials. His website has lots of stuff on it, so very interesting. And you can hear his current teaching as well. He's doing a lot of teaching in Phoenix and around the world. So the primary text, the root text, is Je Tsongkhapa's Three Principal Paths. Je Tsongkhapa is attributed with founding this particular lineage, the Gelugpa lineage, at a time when Buddhism in Tibet was maybe at its nadir. It was in trouble. There was a lot of power struggle, corruption, things like that, and he decided to be sort of like the Martin Luther of Buddhism and kind of bring back the practice, particularly the monastic practice. And he wrote 10,000 pages in his lifetime. They say he was inspired by an earlier, an actual disciple of the Buddha called Manjushri, that he was either a reincarnation of Manjushri or he was kind of sent information through Manjushri. Je Tsongkhapa was the first teacher of the first Dalai Lama, which, by the way, he wasn't called Dalai Lama until there was the third Dalai Lama, and then they named these earlier people Dalai Lamas from that time. So I forget what the word would be for that. Posthumously naming them Dalai Lamas, I guess. And so this is the lineage of the Dalai Lamas. Okay, these materials, the monasteries from which these materials were written, including the 14th Dalai Lama, who we have with us today, luckily, still for some time, hopefully. And Je Tsongkhapa is particularly known for writing something called the Lamrim Steps on the Path. He was inspired by Atisha, who was an Indian pundit, who was the first person that brought together what we call the two wings of Buddhism, compassion and wisdom, the two wings. They say we need both of these things to see our own true identity, our own enlightenment, and we have to work towards acquiring those aspects in our behavior and our knowledge base. So Je Tsongkhapa wrote several Lamrims, and the shortest one that he wrote is called The Source of All My Good, and I have copies of that. Again, if you want, Craig and Karen, you're welcome to take them, but you can always hand them back to me because I know you have multiple copies of this. These get passed out at a lot of the different teachings. So this is the path in code. And the first one says, the source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him or her in the proper way is the very root of the path. And so I'm saying that in order to understand everything that's written here, it is a good idea to find yourself a teacher. And that's what Lama means, teacher. Because this is definitely all in code. A lot of the early scriptures were written in verse like this because books were not common, even during the time of Je Tsongkhapa. And so people were more easily able to memorize verse. Anyway, there is a Lamrim written by Je Tsongkhapa that's 1,000 pages long. So that's his biggest one. That's called the Lamrim Chenmo, and this is his shortest one. And the Lamrim Chenmo is on the shelf in the back. Top shelf left, I think it is, the gold and red books. Is that the Lamrim Chenmo? Or are they all gone? People borrow them, so.
Stages in the path. 1, 2, 2, 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that is a translation of his work of 1,000 pages. And the path is described as having different levels, scopes. The first one is called Scope 1, but before that we have preliminaries. And they say that the two most important preliminaries are to find a teacher to help you if you're interested in the Buddhist path, and secondly is to realize what kind of a life you have and who you really must be to have the life you have, because most people aren't living the way we're living here in this country. All you need to do is just go over the border to the south and you will appreciate that, or go to other continents and see how people in Africa live, for instance. That we are very special beings to have so many leisures and fortunes, that we have the time, we have the education to figure out what is really going on. And if we're not doing that work, then we're kind of wasting all the advantages that we have. So that's what the preliminaries are about. And we'll be talking about some of the rest of this as we go through the course. But I'll just go over very quickly the scopes. So the first scope, which you see in those two verses, my body and the life in it are as fleeting as bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what these thieves will bring to me follow close behind, as certain as my shadow. So the purpose of Scope 1 is to start paying attention to your trajectory. Where are you headed? And what does that mean? In the Eastern traditions, I would say in the majority of the world there is a belief that there is life after this one, some form of life. Even in this country, those who practice some of the spiritual traditions are led to believe that once the body dies, the spirit goes on to some form of other life. So what Scope 1 is saying to us, are you thinking about that? Are you making your life the way it should be, recognizing that there's going to be something after this, and how can you create a good opportunity for yourself after this? We're all dying, every one of us, even the baby that was born today. When you're born, you're on a death trajectory. That's what the human condition is, in this realm, as we call it, of samsara, the suffering realm. So that's Scope 1. Scope 2 is about trying to do something about this suffering realm and the potential of having another life. And it might be trying a Buddhist practice, or at least taking on some spiritual practice, because that's what's going to count after you die. All the things that you've worked hard to acquire in this life, the cars, the TVs, the houses, the jewelry, the tools, and other things that are cluttering up your domain, they're not going with you when you die. Even the pharaohs didn't actually take them. We know that because the tombs have been opened and they're still there, still here. So all the things we're working hard to acquire are going to help us after we die, and since we don't know when we're going to die, we should maybe pay some attention to acquiring more spiritual merits than worldly goods. So that's pretty much what Scope 2 is about, trying on a spiritual life in hopes that it will be significant after this life. And I have to say, from my own experience, it's very significant during this life. It's really changed how I see things, how I see myself, and especially how I behave towards others. So it has its rewards even in this life. Scope 3 is sometimes referred to as the higher scope, because it's not just about you and your needs and your death and your future life, but it's about our interconnectedness with all beings. Some people talk about the Great Spirit that we all belong to, are connected to. And so Scope 3, all the way to the end, is about that. What does that mean? How do I take that into my practice and make it meaningful? And this is definitely the compassion side of the path. Whereas the first couple of scopes are largely about the wisdom side, although there's some wisdom built into scope 3 as well. You notice on the right-hand column I wrote higher teaching. Within scope 3 there's a higher level of teaching called Tantra. It has a yogic tradition, as does all of Buddhism, really. And this is something that you have to prepare for. You have to get accepted into, kind of like graduate work. So we think of it as graduate work in Buddhism. So you, in order to get there, you have to have a teacher, because it's your teacher who is the portal and allows you into the higher teachings. But that's probably not going to happen until you find yourself working hard in these other scopes. Not that you can't find a teacher, you should find a teacher, but the teacher will observe you, and when you appear to have worked at these other levels, will probably invite you then to try the more advanced practices. All right, so that's a little bit about the Lam Rim. And in the Lam Rim is information about the principal teachings of Buddhism. And if you want that in great detail, then I recommend to you the Lam Rim Chenmo, which you can borrow from the library. And there are other books. There are loads and loads of books on the Lam Rim that you can get a sort of medium presentation on if you're not ready for 1,000 pages. And also somewhat esoteric, because they come out of a time, the 1400s, when the way people spoke and thought was different than now. So I like to also give you a sense of his lineage, and here's something I put together that just shows some of the lineage, meaning how this information got passed down. I think I fixed Asanga finally, Greg, on this one. I think I had Ashtanga originally, which means 8 limbs, but not appropriate for this. So these are some of the names that have been involved in the teachings that you're going to hear. And they all are purported to emanate from the Buddha's teachings, which we know to be about 2,500 years old. And I say purported because written information from the Buddha's teachings wasn't acquired until 300-400 years after he actually lived. Just like the Bible, the words of Jesus weren't written down immediately either. So they depend on someone else's hearing and then faithful passing down of the oral tradition. And just as with the Christian tradition, there were councils of disciples who would meet and they would vet each other's memory of what was heard. So if you actually read translations of the sutra from the Buddha, it often starts with "once I heard," meaning it doesn't say once the Buddha said, it says once I heard, because part of the teachings of Buddhism is that everything we hear is colored by our own past experience. So take that into account when you hear these ideas and things. The Buddha himself encouraged all his disciples to test everything that he said. That don't take this on blind faith. Test it through your own experience, through your logic, and through what others who you respect have to say about it. Others who have a spiritual background have to say about it. So mostly what we have in our materials from Geshe Michael are commentaries on the Buddha's words. And those are collected, the Indian commentaries, I think it could be the Tibetan commentaries, I don't remember now, are in a collection called Tengyur. So that's what those two words are. Kangyur is the Buddha's words, and Tengyur are commentaries on the Buddha's words. And then the 5 great books I mentioned to you, two of the books that are on the list with the courses aren't part of the 5 great books. One of them is a book called The Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Master Shantideva, and 3 of the courses, one of them is going on right now, come from that book. He was a monk in the 700s who talked about how to live a life of altruism as a way to find your true identity as a Buddha. So Geshe Michael decided to include that as part of his coursework. And also the Lamrim Chenmo, which I just mentioned, and that was predated by Lord Atisha's work, Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. Those 2 are not considered part of the 5 great books either, but they are embedded in the coursework and pretty much part of the class we're doing today. Some of the English translations came from Ken Rinpoche, who is Geshe Michael and Lama Marut's teacher. And I'm going to talk about him again in a minute. But you see then there's Geshe Michael, who has done something called the Asian Classics Input Project, which is a remarkable effort to save the teachings of Buddhism, because so many of them have been lost primarily through invasion of countries by others who do not have the respect for the materials. So, all the Tibetan books, so many of the Tibetan books libraries were lost. I think 1,000 monasteries were decimated when the Chinese took over. And similarly, in India, when the Mongols came through, they laid to waste all the materials. Ironically, Geshe Michael himself took on searching the world for any texts that he could find. And ironically, he found some of them in Russia. And it's ironic because his major in college was Russian. And the reason it ended up in Russia is because of the Mongolians, who took over, some of these countries, and then the Russians apparently took over the Mongolians and took the texts to, especially St. Petersburg, I guess. But there, even in Mongolia, he's finding things and stuff. So he has people who continue to find these materials, and he hires Tibetan refugees to input them on a computer so they're not lost, because generally they come in this paper format. At least the Tibetan ones came in that long, skinny format like that because they were block printed, just papers that were block printed. So preserving them, very difficult. If you go to a Tibetan temple where they have the real Tibetan books, you'll see shelves, and there are all these skinny books like that with hardbound. They're not even hardbound, but they have block covers and ties. But and if you want to, you're welcome to open that and look at that sometime. Anyway, so we have Geshe Michael to thank for this coursework, but also for saving a lot of the different Buddhist teachings. And then Lama Marut took all these courses and synthesized them into something called Dharma Essentials. So that's something else that you can study if you want. If you don't want to do the 10-session courses, you can study the 4-session courses. And again, you can find those taught here under these people's names. And there are 15 of those. And we just finished the Dharma Essentials here. And to be sure you get all of them, I have to add Bob's name too, because he did the last couple. So, Bob Arnold, who is a new teacher, who taught Dharma Essentials 15, the last one of the Dharma Essentials. So lots of opportunity to get this information. A menu of opportunity, however you like it. And this is an old handout because it says ACI K-Band, which is now called, we used to be called ACI K-Band, we're called Wisdom's Heart now. All right, so homework 1, as I said, we have that Principal Teachings of Buddhism, author Jason Kappa. Questions 2 through 4 are also in the reading on page 1. So the commentary, as I mentioned, in a lot of these courses you have a root text, which usually means an earlier text, and then commentary by someone else. The commentary on this root text of Jason Kappa was done by Pabonka Rinpoche, and he lived in 1878 to 1941, so a lot more contemporary than Jason Kappa. And quite the character, colorful character apparently in his time. He was, you see 1941, he was teaching in Tibet. The Chinese had not yet taken over the country. And he is very much known for teaching to the common person. Often in Tibet, only the monks, male monks, receive teachings in the monastery. The lay people and the nuns did not receive teachings, and only certain subsets of the male monks received some of the sophisticated teachings. But Pabonka Rinpoche went out and taught in the villages and became a very popular teacher, and he was on the outs apparently with the Dalai Lama and other higher ups during his lifetime because he did that. But now, of course, he's much venerated for having done it, which is the story of many people who have brought us great things. It's only after they died that they're really appreciated. And so a lot of what you're going to read there in your reading is the word of Pabonka Rinpoche. And his student, Trijong Rinpoche, basically collected all of his teachings, wrote them down, and then was responsible for saving them. So this commentary was given by Pabonka Rinpoche, but saved and put forth in writing by Trijong Rinpoche. But they say that Pabonka Rinpoche vetted Trijong Rinpoche's work. And the other interesting part about Trijong Rinpoche is that he is one of the tutors of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, and also the teacher of Ken Rinpoche, who is Geshe Michael's direct teacher and Lama Rut's direct teacher. So all of these to show you that the teachings that we have here came from Geshe Michael and Lama Rut are very close to people who are in the tradition of the Dalai Lamas. So the introduction to the commentary was written by Ken Rinpoche. Sometimes it helps us to understand paths by understanding what the goal is. What's the end game here in a Tibetan practice? And that is basically to have a very profound experience during meditation after great and intense study. And that experience is to have a direct perception of how things truly exist, not elaborated by the mind, but an experience that you just reside in, kind of like experiencing a sunset, just being in the sunset, or maybe floating, on a body of water and just gazing up at the sky without any thoughts, just being in it. That kind of an experience, but where the outcome is understanding that things are created by us. And so that's the goal, is to have that experience, so we truly understand how we can change our world by understanding how our world was created. So, we're up to homework 5 now, which is on page 19, and onward, because a lot of the reading is about this. This question, reading in both the classes we're doing today, is about the 3 principal paths. And so question 5 is, what are the 3 principal paths? And they are renunciation, compassion, and wisdom. This class is supposed to be largely about renunciation, but you'll see there'll be a lot of other things brought into it. But then the class after the break will take up compassion and wisdom. Compassion is often referred to as bodhicitta, which we'll talk about later. In your notes, you'll see the Tibetan, often used. Geshe Michael studied in the Tibetan language, and he likes to use Tibetan because he feels that there's something spiritual about using the language of origin. Lama Marut likes to use Sanskrit for the same reason, and he is a Sanskrit scholar. He's not a Tibetan scholar. Geshe Michael's a Tibetan scholar. I study mostly with Lama Marut. I have studied a little with Geshe Michael, but I do not attempt to say the Tibetan words because I have not studied enough of the Tibetan. But they're fairly phonetic. Something like that is the Tibetan for renunciation. You're going to see throughout these notes Tibetan and Sanskrit used. The Sanskrit is not shown here in your notes. So, what I've done with the information that Geshe Michael gave us is thought about each of these in terms of steps as well. So under renunciation, these are the steps I've recognized. First of all, renunciation isn't going to be possible for anyone until they realize that this life is a suffering life. At least, as Lama likes to talk about now, a stressful life. That it's pretty hard for people in this country to say, oh yeah, I'm really suffering. But if you talk about suffering as unhappiness or stress, then you've got it. So first of all is to recognize, even though we have lots of wonderful things, opportunities, we're still not happy. And it doesn't have to be like that. So step 1 is to accept that, to recognize it. Life is suffering. A lot of it is caused by our not accepting the fact that everything's changing. We're trying to hold on to things to keep them the way they are, or to change them and make them different. And we're kind of ignoring the truth about the fact that everything is changing and that what happens in the moment isn't really changeable in the moment, which leads to our discontent and our stress. The second important part about renunciation, I think, is realizing that spiritual things are very important, as I mentioned a while ago. If we just live our life guided by the commercials on TV, we're not necessarily going to have a happy life. We're always going to want more, feel like we're not as good as the other folks next to us who have that thing that's advertised. So, if we recognize that being a spiritual person is really what makes you happy, then that's an important part of renunciation. Okay? Because you're renouncing the things that other people are seeking. You're not being guided by how other people live their lives, but rather by how you live your life and get your happiness. And we look to the spiritual traditions to guide us in that way. And all the spiritual traditions tell us that what it means to worry about spiritual things is to be a good person, not do bad things, not harm others. And we know this because we have been plagued by things we've done. They won't leave us alone. Whenever I think about this, I think about Jiminy Cricket. That's my age, I guess, but, on the shoulder, telling us in the ear, or the other image of the good angel on one side and the bad angel on the other side. We know. We know that there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And what goes around comes around. We reap what we sow. These are all terms that come out of other spiritual traditions. We know in our hearts that when we do things, especially that harm other people, we are setting ourselves up for problems. So that's kind of what it means to think about spiritual things as being important. And in the Buddhist tradition, it's believed that we cause the vicissitudes in our life, the ups and downs, with our behaviors and our thoughts and our speech. So recognizing the import of spiritual things for ourselves. That's the second thing. The third thing, really important and exciting part of renunciation, is to believe that it's possible to recognize your Buddha nature. That like Adam and Eve, you should be living in a perfect paradise. But you've screwed it up somehow. And your true nature is obscured by the screw-ups, by the elaborations of the mind. That's what the yogis believed in the Yoga Sutra. The second verse is Yoga Shuti Vritti Nirodha. We will be happy when we stop allowing our mind to twist in the wrong direction. So possible to change how we see ourselves and our world. And that's a part of renunciation too. Renouncing this negativity that we live with day in and day out, especially when we turn on the news. We are just so primed to look at things from a negative perspective. And everything is multifaceted. There isn't a single way to look at anything. There are multiple ways. Part of renunciation is renouncing the glass half empty. Okay? Taking up the glass half full. And that's how you start acting like a Buddha and seeing your world as a paradise, by looking for the positives instead of the negatives. So those are my thoughts on what does renunciation mean. It doesn't mean you have to give up all the good stuff. That's important because renunciation often goes along with ideas about, people who take vows and robes and things like that. They renounce money, they renounce sexual activity and things like that. That's not what it's about at all. As a matter of fact, we're encouraged to have money so we can use it to help others. And so we don't have to depend on others, take from others. Be a helpee. Lummer likes to talk about be a helper instead of a helpee. Don't quit your job and just study all the time, because somebody then has to support you, and you're not being helpful to others if they have to support you. So embrace what this life offers you. Just be smart about what you do with it. If it's tucked away in a closet and you're never using it, well, you don't need it. Stop acquiring things like that. That's a message to you that these are things you don't need, and they're probably causing you stress because you have to dust them or you have to shift them out of the way so you can fit other things in. You can tell somebody who's just moved, right? These are the examples that she thinks of. There's all this stuff that I've got to now fit into my new place, which is smaller than my big place. So hopefully I'm going to be renouncing some of the things I dragged to the new place. I thought I did a good job, but apparently not totally. So, be thoughtful about the things that you acquire from now on. And don't acquire them just because it's what other people are doing. Think about how can these help me reach my spiritual goals, or how can they help me help someone else. So, when I heard this teaching, and I thought, oh, now I can't go shopping with my friends anymore, or when I go on vacation. What do you do when you go on vacation? You usually end up shopping, especially when it rains. What am I going to do on the rainy days when I go on vacation? So, here's what we learn to do in Buddhism. We learn to transform things into something positive. So now when I go shopping, I'm always shopping for somebody else. Well, not always, wrong word. Most of the time, I'm shopping for somebody else, or I'm shopping for myself because I really need something, like a new pair of winter boots, because my other ones leak. Now, I probably could have put duct tape on them and kept the old ones going, but I decided I deserve new boots. So, and I had the money, and probably I would be a better helper to other people by wearing boots that weren't leaky. Amazing what I can rationalize when I want to go shopping. Anyway, but do that. Go through that in your mind before you take your resources of time and money and use it to acquire things. And remember, when you acquire things, perhaps you're keeping other people from having them too. We use up the resources of the planet, don't we? Something to think about. Just driving to the mall uses up petrol and puts carbon dioxide into the ozone layer and things like that. So be thoughtful. That's what leading a spiritual life is. Questions? So that's the idea about renunciation in general. You don't necessarily have to give stuff up. You just have to be smart about why you're acquiring things or using them. And don't forget, you can get rid of a lot of your stuff and make it meaningful. You can take it to dress code, men's stuff too. Or what is it in Beverly, Bootstraps?
Yeah, in Ipswich, it's where I lived mostly. Trying to think. Actually, I took it to those big yellow bins.
Right. In Beverly, they have a program called Bootstraps. Here we have something called Second Glance, which is recycled. People can buy it, and people who, by the way, who are in a fire or some other tragedy can go there and get whatever they need for free.
Is that a outlet on like Cabot Street?
I'm not sure where.
Yeah.
Is it?
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I saw something like that yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still learning Beverly, so.
Bootstraps. Yeah. So it's a beautiful thing to do with all of the stuff you need to get rid of. It helps you by getting rid of it, but it helps somebody else. So you get like double the merit. So exciting. And then if you really need something, you can go and buy it in one of those places. And I mentioned dress code because the woman who runs it is a part of this group here, and she gives 10% of everything we bring in. If we say, we're part of the Buddhist group, back to this center. Plus, you get money back yourself. And you can say to her, I want all the money to go to the Buddhist center. So the next part of the path is called bodhicitta in Sanskrit and Jangchu Ki Sem. I know I said I wasn't going to try the Tibetan, but when it's easy, I try it. It is called Jangchu Ki Sem because I heard especially Michael say it many times. And what it means is the wish for enlightenment. Question 5.
Would that be in the notes?
In the notes?
On the note of page
Page 1 and 2.
Jangchu Ki Sem. It says 2, meaning the second path. Did you find it? Okay. But I'm just wondering if this is the second homework question. Oh, no. I mean, homework question 5.
It is,
Okay.
second part of it.
It's just that my printer lost homework 5 somehow. Okay. I had a feeling it was a homework question. And what does that question say, Craig?
Name the 3 principal paths.
Oh, sorry. So it's still part of 5.
Yep.
Okay, there's another question about bodhicitta, but I guess it's in the afternoon class. So here's bodhicitta. What it means is the wish for enlightenment. Enlightenment is a code word for recognizing, awakening to who you really are, to your real potential, to act like a Buddha, or like a Jesus, or like a Muhammad, or any of the other holy people who have tried to show us the right way to live our lives. So again, I've taken some of the ideas that Geshe Michael has given us and put them into some steps. So to acquire this wish for enlightenment, it's really important to want to change your life. To decide, yeah, I don't have it right yet. That's why I'm here. I'm at a class on a Sunday afternoon. I could be home raking leaves, I guess. So maybe use this as an out so you didn't have to rake the leaves. But let's hope you came for more spiritual reasons than that. So first of all, really desire a change in your life. A lot of us came to Buddhism out of tragedies. People close to us have died and sent us into a tailspin of wondering what it's all about, for instance. Some people came to Buddhism because they found that they have everything they've ever wanted and they're still not happy, and they can't figure out why they're still not happy. So recognize that there's more to life than what you're experiencing, and wish that you could find out what that is. So really desiring a change in your life so you can find the truth of why we're here and who we are, rather than following the crowd of lemmings who are just sailing along, getting up every day, going to work, coming home, downing a few beers, watching the tube, going to bed, getting up groggy, going to work, over and over and over again, the same cycle, without much change. Saturday you get to have more beers, because you're not going to work the next day, but generally, that's how a lot of people live their lives. Or they're dealing with tragedies that pop up in front of them, or just the difficulties and vicissitudes of life. And that's their whole life. Occasionally getting a little bit of pleasure here and there with some sensual experiences. So first of all, desire that you don't live like that anymore. Secondly, try out a Buddhist practice or another spiritual practice. You can't know if this works unless you try it. I mean, I think some people come to Buddhism because they do know other people and they watch the metamorphosis that's occurred as they've taken on a Buddhist practice, and they say, well, got to be something good going on here. I'm going to go check it out. But just checking it out isn't going to give you the goods. Just sitting and hearing isn't going to give you the goods. You've got to do something. You've got to try it. So you have to take action. So first is the wish to change your life, and second is then taking some action to change your life. And if you follow a Buddhist path, you can prove to yourself that you are the creator of your own identity, of your own life. It's not somebody else's problem or fault. It all comes this way, as we say. I'm sorry, we say it all goes that way. It's all coming from us, not at us. And then the third step is to practice being a bodhisattva. What that means is that you really truly put others ahead of yourself. You're a spiritual warrior. Bodhisattva means warrior, spiritual warrior. And your goal is to reach awakening yourself so you can help others do it. If we can truly become that kind of a person, we can experience true bliss with everything that we do. And eventually, we can see the future and read people's minds. That's what the scripture says happens to people who act this way. Because of their altruism, they get the tools they need to be of real help to people. They know how to coach them to help improve their lives. And eventually, let me just finish this and then I'll take your question. And eventually, when you appreciate your true identity, when you've habituated to your true identity, they say you can actually emanate multiple bodies out to help people. So in the state we are now, our help is kind of meager. But ultimately, following the path to the conclusion, we get the power that we need to be of real help to people. We understand what their needs are, we have omniscience about that, and we also are able to send out replications, I guess, but not necessarily of how we look now, but in whatever form people need us to be. So some people posit that we're surrounded by Buddhas already, replicants of people who have awakened, who are really here to help us. And of course my favorite phrase is, thank you all so much for being here, Buddhas, so I can learn this material better and see my own enlightenment. I would not have perhaps prepared for hours and hours if you weren't here to receive it. Ruth, question?
Well, I don't know if I'm the only one that wonders about this when I read it. Reading people's minds. What is meant by that?
Understanding what's bothering them. Being able to tell them what they need to give up and take up. That's what they say.
Not actually reading people's thoughts, like before they say something, you know what they're going to say. I mean, you said get that.
When Ruth had talked about that a little bit too, he said, I don't think that would be fun if you could actually read people's minds.
There was a movie with, what's his name, where he could read, supposedly hear people's thoughts. It was pretty funny. I forget who he was.
I think he's talking empathy by that, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't know, to be honest, because I'm not there yet. However, it's very, very interesting. Maybe you've had this experience that you go to a teaching, those of you who have gone to teachings, with a question in your mind. And lo and behold, the next thing you know, the teacher's talking about that very thing that you had a question about. What does that mean? It happens to me all the time. All the time. So, one way I choose to think about it is that other people are a mirror for me, for what is going on in my own mind, that I have the answers inside myself, but I'm not readily extracting them because the other things are obscuring it. You know, I have this one point of view and I'm not open enough to see all the possibilities. But somehow, as I'm listening to a teaching, something opens and that answer is there for me. But the teacher is a mirror or a sounding board, maybe it'd be more appropriate to say a sounding board for some part of my own thinking. And that's one of the feelings I have about it. So whether the person's omniscient or not, maybe they're a sounding board, you know, in such a way. So without even knowing it, words come out of their mouth that actually came from you. And I've had some experiences with people who say they're speaking to others friendly beyond and saying things that only I and my husband would have known. And I've come to think that what that person is doing is getting information from me, not from beyond necessarily. So it's how I've come to see some of this thinking. The yogis of old, though, tell us, the Mahasiddhas, people of great powers, back in the time of the Buddha, a lot of people were trying to, their goal was to get powers like this, the ability to read minds. And they say they did acquire the ability to read people's minds. I don't know. It appears like it's happening in certain scenarios, but my logical brain tells me that somehow I'm putting it out there, and then they're just giving back to me what I'm putting out there.
Yeah. Well, I could relate it to, like you said, it's more of a metaphor for maybe empathy, or you were talking about also the energy of what's coming from us. It's somehow introduced. I think about it when a mother learns to interpret her baby's cry. The baby can't say, hey, pick me up, I'm hungry. Hey, pick me up, I'm wet. Hey, pick me up, I've got pain. All of that. But yet, you get this feeling. You kind of know what's going on in the moment and what that little person needs. And then, I guess it would be reading the baby's mind. It's coming from you. But there's that level of understanding or connection, empathy, that you acquire somehow, like magic. You just get it.
Let's see,
Maybe that's it.
I'm just saying, my thought is that in fact, you are getting those messages, and what comes out of you isn't necessarily coming from you. Your responses are somewhat automatic. And sometimes when I teach individually, or in groups like this, stuff comes out of my mouth and I say, oh, where did that come from? But it's the right thing. And so I'm still pretty into this sounding board thing, that people are wanting this information pulled out of them, not able to get it themselves, and so somehow it comes out to me sometimes, not all the time. And as you say, this is a perfect example. If you can do that with your own children, what if you were open enough to see everybody as your children? Then you would be able to get those messages from everybody, what they need. See? So we're right back to where we started about having the omniscience, about what people need to take us. If you're open enough to receive what other people are sending you, and then you know what they need. So I think it can be quite possible that happens, because we have examples of it, especially mothers and children. All right, so the third principal path is Yang Dakpe Tawa, and it translates as correct view of emptiness, the nature of things, and in Sanskrit we often use the term jnana, J-N-A-N-A. But there are lots of different words for it in Sanskrit. That's just one that we hear a lot. And I'm feeling that we should maybe take an early break, because I don't want him to miss this particular part of the teaching. So let's take our break early. And everybody who needs to, please enjoy the facilities.